Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? It's your boy Isaac,
And this is your boy Bryce.
and we are brothers on tennis. And folks, we've got our good buddy back with us. We've got Paul Haberman with us, and we are going to talk some tennis and talk some legal stuff that surrounded the U.S. Open. Bryce, I know that we saw a lot during the U.S. Open. But always good to have Paul back on the show. And yeah, just hand it over to you, my man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back here. Yeah, actually, I was inclined to start before the U.S. Open, just kind of chronologically ease in and then get to the main event of the evening, Simona Halep here, which not for the right reasons, but main event of the evening just the same. But yeah, we're talking right before about that sort of strange ruling at the National Bank Open and that match between Milos Raonic and Francis Tiafoe. Bryce actually said he spoke to the judge about that later. Why don't you maybe you want to tell us about that call there?
Yeah, when Isaac and I were in Cincinnati, we got an opportunity to talk to chair umpire Fergus Murphy. And for those of you that follow tennis, he's one of the vets and been around forever. Well, he was the chair umpire for that match. And for those that don't remember exactly what the situation was, it was a point where Tiafoe was running up to hit a shot. And after the shot, he ran into the net. Now, I think most of us, the way we feel and we think about it is, well, once you hit the net, then you lose the point. Well, right. Fergus Murphy did not award the point to Raonic. He gave it to Tiafoe because Tiafoe won the point before he hit the net. And when we asked him about it, he stated, and this is what he stated on court, and it seemed like not only did common people like us not know about this ruling, but the players weren't even really familiar with this. But in a singles match, the part of the net that you cannot touch is the part that extends across the singles court.
Okay.
And if you think about it, when you go to tournaments that don't have doubles, the net only extends to across the singles portion of the court. So if you happen to be on a court where the net extends across the doubles alleys, if you end up touching the net on the where it extends over the doubles alleys, that is not an infraction. Only if you touch the part of the net that extends across the singles part of the court. And Fergus told us, he said, apparently a lot of people were not familiar with that rule, but he said that is the rule. And a lot of people learned something that day.
Raonic wasn't even familiar with that rule because you saw his reaction to it. He was livid because he just knew that point was his. And Fergus was like, no, he touched the double side of the net. That does not count. That is not considered to be a infraction or what have you. So yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, I'm not sure Tiafoe knew either, but it wasn't really his business to say either way.
Tiafoe was just happy. He was just like, "Hey, I won."
And if you think about it, as we're talking, and I'm playing it through my head, you would not be called for an infraction for a part of the net that is not in play.
Right.
It's not in play.
It's basically invisible, imaginary, whatever you want to call it. It's there, but it's not there. So again, when you're playing singles, even though it's the doubles part, it's basically not there or not considered to be a factor when you are playing singles.
Right.
Interesting. One to grow on for for the men's tour or the men's and women's tour going forward, I guess. But yeah, just keeping on chronologically. I mean, I guess right before or more towards the middle of the summer. I don't think you and I think we spoke about Ymer's impending penalty, but the 18-month ban brought down by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. That's the court of last resort unless he goes to the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland. So. And it sounds like he's kind of taken it out of their hands anyway by retiring, if I recall the headlines right. But yeah, I mean, I would say that it's a pretty high-level doping bust. But then you go a few weeks later to Halep, and I was reading one report that's the highest ranked player since Sharapova to get dinged on a doping violation. So, but Yeah, Ymer, I mean, 3 out of competition doping tests are missed. Yeah, and I can tell you, having reviewed a lot of Court of Arbitration for Sport decisions over time, I mean, they're very meticulous. And it sounds like they are at all levels. I mean, the unit that took down Halep also had a 126-page ruling or something like that, reviewing the evidence pretty close. And a lot of times they'll reduce or modify, but if they don't, you have a pretty long road to hoe there as far as getting it challenged. And I haven't even heard of too many that bother going to the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland for it. So I guess if he stays retired, it's moot. But that is also Halep's next step. Not to get ahead of ourselves here. She's already said that she would appeal it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is the next level up. So, by the way, just a little piece of history on why that is. A lot of international sports federations signed on to the, I believe it was the 2009 World Anti-Doping Code, which provided that it is the Court of Arbitration for Sport that will hear the final word on most doping allegations, even if they start in one place, as it did here, in both instances, I should say. That's where they'll get challenged. If there's a challenge, that's where it'll be heard, and as the sort of the last resort. So, like I said, I have very learned opinions, and just an unfortunate occurrence. I mean, you guys might know more about the surrounding circumstances with Ymer, because I know you were pretty upset about it last time. But it's just you hear about these in boxing and a couple other places where somebody's just not available once too often, or even once, and they could get banged for it, depending where they are. In the chain before, some time before the competitions. So, and it sounds like he was one off his best ranking. So that's kind of an inglorious way to go out.
Well, we did have a response from our followers, and their initial reaction was they're hoping that this was just kind of a reactionary move from Mikael, like that somebody would get into his ear and be like,
right.
You drew at 24 years old. You don't want to completely give up your career. We understand you're frustrated now, but I think it's kind of like you said. If he was already kind of like at the last step, pretty much in terms of, the writing was on the wall, they weren't going to overturn this. Then, I mean, what else can you do? You can't play for 18 months.
Right.
You probably don't want to dedicate yourself to training and staying in shape for a year and a half.
Right.
Playing. So. I'm going to be very interested to see if, as we get closer to that 18-month mark, if he's had a change of heart, which I hope he does.
Yeah, and
come back.
Exactly. And I think the thing that makes this even more interesting and intriguing is, lest we forget, he's not the only one in that tennis family. So you got Elias Ymer, who is still out there playing, and in fact just played Davis Cup this past weekend for Sweden. So it's all of this is just really very, very interesting to me, because when you have your brother going through something like this, that a lot of us view it as just simply not being right, or that there's just some, there's some sketch to it, simply put. And you, as and that's your brother, you want to represent him, but at the same time, this is your career as well. So it just, this whole dynamic, man, is very, very interesting. So like you said, Bryce, I would be interested to see if this wasn't more of a reactionary, I'm retiring, I'm just going to be done with it, or if he really decides to come back and really put more energy into it, which I hope he does, because again, he seems to be very much of the positioning that, hey, I've done nothing wrong here. So if that's the case, then to me, stand in there and fight. Don't just give up. So I guess that's my take on it. Is I just find it interesting because, again, it's not just him. That's a family thing.
Right. He's coming off one of the best wins of his career, I believe, also. I mean, at least he left on a high note, relatively speaking.
That double entendre.
Taylor Fritz. No pun intended on the high, whatever he was accused of missing his check-in for. But
yeah.
Oh, wow. But it seems like a shame, given the age, given the ranking, given that he just came off a win over Taylor Fritz. I mean, maybe you guys know this better than me. Just thinking out loud, I know, for example, even like boxers that are semi-retired may still act as sparring partners. I can't say that if you're under medical suspension or drug suspension, you'd be allowed to. Do you know what the rule is in tennis? Could they be just hitting around with people for, like, when they're not allowed to play otherwise?
Yeah, they can be a hitting partner if they're not engaged in
Okay.
actual competition on the tour.
That's what I would have thought.
They can be on whatever they want to be on.
So there's theoretically a living to be made there. Point being,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
Maybe he can coach his brother.
Yeah, you never know. It's not unheard of.
Right.
I mean, you see that with the Zverevs and a few other families where a sibling is coaching or being a part of their team. You see that with the Tsitsipas. Well, maybe not the Tsitsipas, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, actually Djokovic.
With Madison Keys, you have her fiance who's still semi-active as her coach. Also, I thought that was an interesting little development too.
Bjorn Angelo.
This is probably a little more consistent paycheck.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh wow.
Now I have a question with the Simona piece, though. So I know part of Simona's defense is that it somehow got contaminated in her system, or it's an accidental or whatever. But I thought I read that they said the amount that they found in her system, it was very hard for them to believe that would be accidental or contamination.
The sort of the wrap up of it that I've read, including from the independent tribunal's own site, was kind of strange, because on the one hand, they seem to buy that she had contaminated product, which is what she was saying fundamentally. On the other hand, they're saying, well, we might buy it, but there's also too high of an amount between the tests for us to think that it was incident. It's like, did you not believe her? Did you believe her? Like, it was a little fuzzy to me, unless I took the wrong takeaway from it. Maybe you guys saw it differently, but I mean, the whole process with her seemed a little strange. I mean, first it seemed to be an inordinate amount of time where she was provisionally suspended, kind of in limbo for a while. Then it comes down right after right after the U.S. Open. And, it's almost like this, as we were saying before, she's like probably the biggest body that's been dumped in the street by this group since Maria Sharapova. So a message to anybody even considering doping, I mean, even though she maintains her innocence, so I don't know whether her position is strange or whether their position is strange. As far as the levels in there, I mean, she acknowledges doesn't acknowledge, using it inadvertently. I mean, they're saying it's impossible. But of course, it's also against the backdrop, just food for thought, that she was coming back after considering retiring because of injuries and stuff. I guess she could be taking new supplements. Maybe they didn't trust that. Maybe it's a company they shouldn't have put as much trust in. But clearly, there's new things going into her system, perhaps maybe to help with her bounce back, that weren't looked at as closely as possible. I mean, it feels like there's a real industry here for people to like inspect everything athletes ingest in their system as a full-time job when things like this happen, and you want to believe the athlete. So
right. I read somewhere, and this is not necessarily fact, it's just something I read, that they were saying that the change in the supplements that she had made was on the recommendation by her new coach, Patrick Moradoglu.
Right. I saw that.
Yeah. So you saw that as well. And so for those people trying to point fingers as what's happening, Patrick always, and we like Patrick, but it seems like he's always, no matter what player he's working with, he always ends up being at the end of the pointed finger for something, whether it's Luna, Tsitsipas, or even this recent stuff with Coco Gauff, where people are kind of offended that he has taken some credit for her success, which he was there in the very early stages, so he really can.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
People, when they think of him, they're thinking he's jumping on the bandwagon of her success, not really recognizing that he was there very early on in her career. Just an interesting point with the whole Simona and the change of supplements and how that may have happened.
Well, if you count if you ask Serena, she thinks it happened before that Wimbledon final.
Right. She wasn't shy about that. You guys picked up on that.
She threw that shade quick.
And you know what? I must step out. You know, of course, we're big Williams sisters fans, right?
Yes.
And just like I had recently criticized Djokovic for, I mean, you're a GOAT. Why are you mocking Ben Shelton on his celebration? I feel like that's kind of beneath you.
Right.
I felt the same way with Serena on this, right? You're retired, you're out of the game. People generally consider you the GOAT, you know. What value was there in taking this dig at Simona? Now, I have a theory, and y'all don't be bad at me about it, but I think because Patrick was in the mix, is really more of the motivation for her taking the dig than Halep herself.
Right. Yeah, Halep never seemed like much of a fire starter when she was playing, as far as running her mouth or acting out in celebration or anything. But
yeah, no, I agree with you, Bryce, because I just think the fact that Patrick was involved and really it's because again, Patrick left Serena to join Halep's camp, so that's where the shade, that's where the feeling kind of comes into it. So I agree with you. I think that that's still one of those open wounds for Serena because she didn't appreciate it, and I think she just saw an opportunity to again throw that shade, and she did.
Right. And I want Serena to stop that because I think that for a lot of people, it was funny, right, to see because they're looking to hear anything from Serena these days. Right. But I think for a large number of people as well, it was kind of like a little disappointing, you know, to see her kind of stoop that low to do that. So that, and Paul, that leads me to a question that I have for you. So I know in other sports, sometimes when you're found to be dirty, then like if you have a belt or a title or whatever, you can lose that.
Right.
Because of that. But in tennis, it kind of seems like whatever you did while you were dirty, you still retain, you know, whatever it is that you won.
Well, I think it's you know, I'm not sure what the temporal differential was between the suspicious findings for her and her last title, but I can tell you from personal experience, I did have a match. I have a client who's a female, now a former female world champion, who was a female world champion at the time in boxing, and there were some pretty strong suspicions about her opponent's testosterone level. Let's put it that way. And sure enough, she beats my client, but it gets, but it ultimately got vacated because she tested, you know, she came up dirty for, I forget if it was testosterone or a supplement that would boost testosterone after the fight. So World Boxing Organization gave the title back to my client. So in a written decision, but that you know, with boxing at least, again, I'm not sure when this was versus when she won and beat Serena Williams, but in boxing at least, it's very on top of the match temporally. They'll do either before or after or both testing, depending what given belt or given sanction or given commission requires. Here, you know, if it was a month or two later, you could be like, well, that makes sense. But if they literally had some suspicion afterwards, you'd think maybe that has to be looked at closer. And if that is like a fault in the rules, and maybe something they have to look at closer after something like that. Obviously, if it's not there already, they can't hold it against Halep. For the next Halep, if they make some sort of amendment, you know, assuming that she actually, you know, was knowingly dirty, you know, would be the one that would be dinged on something like that, and then the title would theoretically roll back down to the Serena Williams in that particular situation. So, but yeah, I mean,
I remember one of our followers had made a comment about you know, Serena was due a title, and someone responded. They were like, Serena wouldn't even want a title that way. And then Serena comes out with this statement, and I was like, clearly she does.
Apparently so.
However she can get it.
Yeah. I mean, like, visually, there's no unringing the bell, but if there's a technicality to get it anyway, okay.
Right. And Paul, question for you, just in regards to the structure. So I know we have the ITIA, and then you mentioned the the Court of Arbitration, and then you said something about federal. So for our viewers and listeners, and especially for myself, what are the different, I guess, groups, tribunals, whatever you call them, that you go through when you're dealing with a something like this, where you're found to be dirty? Like what's the first body?
So the first body is this ITIA, Independent Tennis Integrity Authority, or whatever it stands for. They're the ones that investigate both doping and gambling violations. Now, I think both would be appealable next to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Definitely the doping, but I imagine the gambling also. Although I can't think of I've necessarily heard of anyone challenged on the gambling versus the doping. Maybe it's just a matter of different sort of investigation, or lower ranked players or whatever it is, maybe not having the budget to go up. But but Court of Arbitration for Sport, again, pursuant to the signatories to the 2009 World Anti-Doping Code, that's the almost like the interim. I'd say it's the interim Court of Appeals, but it's usually where it ends. Because again, you don't hear about too many matters going all the way up to the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland, which is the body you appeal from the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So that would be that would be where it would go again from the integrity unit there up to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, up to the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland. So, and from there, if they were to affirm it, then you're basically out of options at that point. But you're basically out of options if the Court of Arbitration for Sport confirms it. Because, unlike, say, a state court, they don't give like a one-line decision, like, we agree with the findings, affirmed. Like, you'll see that in court sometimes. You don't have much to work with. No, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, like I was saying, puts out some very meticulous decisions. I mean, you look at, for example, I'm just trying to think of ones off the top of my head, Oscar Pistorius, his use of the prosthetics. You look up, it wasn't Castor Semenya, but somebody else that had a similar claim against them, and the insight they put into that in their final decision. And even the one with the French tennis player we were talking about last time, with the weird cocaine issue a couple of years ago.
Gasquet.
Yeah,
Richard Gasquet. I mean, it's a pretty well thought out decision and analysis of all the facts that were put in front of it before it got to finding that he wasn't, on board for that, and in clearing him. And it goes both ways. They can either extremely clear you or extremely put you in the box. So that just kind of shows you they're really looking at what they're doing over there. So that's probably why you don't see too many appeals. Never mind, that's probably cost prohibitive for a lot of athletes too. I'm sure there's enough attorneys that would take that, on contingency for the right exposure. But when you're talking about, for example, lower level tennis players getting doinked for gambling, probably not going to find a law firm that will take that pro bono. Maybe somebody would take somebody like Halep or even Ymer pro bono, but not necessarily somebody like ranked number 1,400 in the world, playing futures tours and rigging the first round results. So probably not as likely. But yeah, look, I thought Halep's attorney, it seems to have done everything he could with the information they had. I would imagine she, maybe even more so than Ymer, and probably not as much as Sharapova at the time, has the budget to go further if they want. But you can't just bring things up. You need something you can point to as an error. And I'm not sure if they'll be able to do that here, because if they're saying error of fact, I didn't take this knowingly, they come back and say, well, not an error of fact, because we also have facts that say, that this is too high of a level to have taken incidentally or accidentally. So, and then they'd have to be pointing to an error of law that may not be there when you're looking at a very fact-intensive inquiry, using experts and analysts and everything else, of the chemistry, that was found in their blood work. So, not an easy road if they even wanted to go up. If there was, I think you need some sort of just almost self-evident legal issue that was an error for it to really go up, versus just a disagreement over the facts. So she might be out of luck even if she tries here. Long story short.
Well, I know that they stated with this 4-year ban, they were going to give her credit for the time that she had already not been playing.
Right.
So isn't it almost like she has, like you said, if there's not a financial restriction for her, she might as well appeal because that time is going to be time that she's already not playing anyway.
Right.
And she can maybe cross her fingers and hope that it'll change. But I agree, like you, if the reason that they're saying that she's found guilty is because of the levels they found in her system, that fact is not going to change.
Right.
Right. And you could be sure that they already had a pretty top-notch expert to kind of dispute or try to lessen the findings that obviously the unit's experts had found. So, and if it's not bought, it's not bought. That's pretty much what it is on every other level of the court system too. You could take a medical malpractice, have two people talk about the same procedure, whichever one carries the day carries the jury. That's not appealable. So, unfortunate but true. But yeah, so it's a kind of inglorious end to her. I always liked watching her in her peak. I'm sure you guys did too. And she took long enough to get a major or two, given how many chances she had. I feel like she was almost like the Ons Jabeur of that wave. Like she got close several times, and it's like,
right. Yeah, it was her and Caroline Wozniacki. They seemed to be kind of back and forth, and then Caroline won the Australian Open, and then Halep was like, "Well, wait a minute, I can't be out here all by myself." And then she got the French.
Right.
And then, of course, that Wimbledon over Serena, where everybody acknowledges that's probably the best match she ever played in her life.
Right.
And I met Halep last year at the City Open, and she was a very, very gracious and nice person. I mean, I know that has nothing here nor there with what the situation is, but yeah, you hate to see someone go down like this. But and there's even been talk by the players that just the whole process that is used for professional tennis players needs to be revisited. The whole out of competition test.
Right.
There are several aspects about them having to notify. They said it's crazy. They have to notify those people basically where they are every day of the year. Like they have to, because I think even in the Ymer case, he was saying one of the situations was they came to test him, but his hotel had been changed and his agent had neglected to notify the people that there was a hotel change that I think was driven by the tournament. You get popped for something like that. I mean,
well, I think that hits on another point. There should be some allowance, and maybe there was for both. I can't say off the top of my head for situational issues, things that make it a little more palatable in the right situation. Sounds like, to your point, they had that with Ymer. I don't know if they had that with Halep there ultimately. So,
well, and I think a lot of it is subjective too, because I mean, we had even heard kind of rumors where there were other very popular, players that didn't really get, a consistent level of testing, or that they missed their tests on several occasions and they never got punished. So it just seems like there definitely is some room for improvement with the entire process, because it seems honestly that it can be a bit subjective depending on who it is and how they want to go about conducting said tests. And we'll leave that right there.
Fair enough. Well, shoot, I have a few other smaller things that might be worth raising. I think you touched on one of them already, but I'll go chronologically in the order of things of the U.S. Open. What was it? The first round match between Coco Gauff and Laura Siegemund got a little chippy. And, it led me to the question, especially when I was hoping to meet you guys in person there, although the law gods frowned on me for that week. But, they got the question of, would that fall under unsportsmanlike conduct in the WTA Grand Slam rule book? That there wasn't a handshake by a Siegemund at the end. Because unsportsmanlike conduct is a potential $20,000 fine, which seemed over and above what the situation called for, but it's there to be used if it was found. And just to give you an idea of what would rise to that level, let me just read you the definition of unsportsmanlike conduct, or which says, in relevant part, any misconduct by a player that is clearly abusive or detrimental to the sport. Now, I'm not sure if it rises to that level, but it's certainly disrespectful. I think we would agree, but maybe it made sense in context. And, you always, I've written articles about it in the boxing context. People do some weird crap after they lose sometimes, they're not always in the best mood. They're not always able to snap out of it too quick.
Right.
I mean, you hope for guys like Tiafoe, who's always very effusive, he seems, even when losing, giving a legitimate props to the other side and being a sport about it, even if he's upset. But then you do have people like Siegemund, where it's
didn't she shake Coco's hand? She didn't shake the umpire's hand.
Was that what it was? Yeah, I think that might be what it was. Yeah. She was fighting with the umpire a lot also. But then it's again, I don't think it rises on sportsmanlike conduct, but you don't want to encourage that to go on unchecked either, necessarily. So I don't know if
I guess my question, Paul, is because I guess, and I don't know the tennis rule book well enough to know this though, but is shaking someone's hand actually a part of the rules? I mean, I understand playing the game is a part of the rules, but when you're done with the match, you're done with the match. I mean, now mind you, I love the handshakes only because I like to see the interaction. Like, okay, is someone salty or are they gracious or what have you? But in truth, when I think about the handshake, to me, I think it's kind of arbitrary because it's, again, if the last point has been played, I don't need to shake your hand. I mean, I think it's one of those tennis, the tennis purist thing, and that's the thing that's been done over the years.
I don't know. It does feel like more of a norm or more of a sign of good sportsmanship. I think that's the point of having such a vague definition of, of the verbiage there. So kind of leaves it open. Let's make a more extreme example. What if Lars Siegemund went over to the chair umpire and spit in her face at the end, or told Coco Gauff to F off, or whatever it was, something a little more drastic, turn it up a notch or two. That would probably fall under unsportsmanlike conduct more readily, to your point, I think. Than, But still, you don't like to see stuff like that, just the same. So, and then the one you guys were referring to earlier, Djokovic hanging up the phone when he beat Shelton.
Yeah.
Another one where you're like, you might crack up, but you're like, is that really necessary here?
Right.
I hate to see what Kyrgios did to Shelton if he lost or won in close or heartbreaking fashion. So
right. But, the thing that annoyed me about Djokovic was in his press conference afterwards, he tried to make it like, oh, I really liked his celebration, so I just decided to steal it. And like we were saying on our show, after you win or lose a match, you can do whatever you want to do, but don't try to act like we don't know what's going on, because it's a whole different ball game when you do somebody else's celebration.
Correct. You are openly mocking them. You're openly mocking them. Openly. So if you do something that someone else has done, you are mocking them. Just simply put. So stop trying to play the role and I just like to say stop it. Because to me, then you're patronizing me as a fan. Because it's like don't patronize me, own that shit. If you're gonna say that you did it, be like, I did it.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's flip it. What if somebody beats Djokovic at Wimbledon and pulls a blade of grass out and tastes it as part of his celebration? You think he wouldn't take that personally? Like, that's what he does.
Or goes and does the boob toss.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost asking for it going forward with anybody that beats him now, as far as what his tradition is on a particular court. So,
well, have you noticed there have been several other players now doing the hang up? We've had
Musetti, I think, right?
Do it. We had it was somebody. Was it Musetti that did it?
I think I got him confused. I mean, unless both of them did it, but
yeah.
Well, Fognini good for mocking, so that does not surprise me that he did that.
Right.
One thing that's interesting, though, and again, this is not, I think this is more of what do you call it? Imitation is a form of flattery, as Ben put it about Novak. Notice how Coco is kind of doing a little bit of a spin now when she wins, and that's a Venus move. Venus does that spin.
Yes.
And so when I saw Coco do it, I was like, that looks familiar, Coco.
But did she do it to Venus when she beat her? The answer is
no. She just has done it, which I love.
No.
Yeah, no.
That would have been really cheeky for a 15-year-old, to say the least. But
but yeah, love that though.
Let's put it this way. I think he got Shelton's attention for next time, if that even matters with Djokovic. But I think Djokovic has everybody's attention every time. So, or at least he should. So, whether he's going to come more mentally prepared, I'm not sure how much more mentally prepared you have to be for a Djokovic match. But just the same, I don't know if it rises to unsportsmanlike conduct, but just not the most becoming necessarily. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Bryce.
I can't audio there.
Yeah, I think your audio might be having some issues there, Bryce. But yeah. But overall, yes. It's again, we all know that. Yeah.
Now you froze for a second there.
Oh, did I freeze, Paul?
Yeah, now you're all back. Okay, I think.
All right, there we go.
But overall, what you're saying? I'm sorry.
No, just again, it was a very good, very interesting U.S. Open, to say the least. Did you have any other notes that you had drafted out there, Paul?
No, I mean, it started with a bang with the Siegemund issue, and I thought there was going to be all sorts of other ones, but really no. I mean, is there anything you guys picked up on? I mean, that and the phone hang up were the only real two that I was like, wow, that's some stuff right there. But
Oh, Bryce, I think we're having
a slew of them.
We may be having an issue, Bryce, with your audio. We can't hear you. I can still hear you, Paul, but
okay.
Yeah,
we can keep going. No, somehow the U.S. Open, even though the crowd is less civilized, seemed more civilized than the on-court at Wimbledon.
Right.
Where the crowd is more civilized, but the on-court antics somehow are not. It's
right.
I guess it just depends on the year and the players and the heat of the battle and what have you. So
absolutely. All right. Well, Paul, do you have anything else that you would like to share with the group out there, the folks who are watching and or listening?
Nothing off the top of my head. Again, unless there's anything random I may have missed that you guys think I should have picked up on from the rules of the game in any of the recent tournaments. I think those are the things that stood out to me. By the way, one small one I will point out. This probably goes back from before the last time we spoke, but I did go to the DC Open qualifiers, and I guess no need to drag the player's name into this specifically, but it's pretty veteran, at least doubles player of some accomplishment. Just smashed his racket to smithereens when he lost in qualifiers, and again, I think that is potentially an offense, but it's like you're not going to ding them on the smaller events, but you don't want to see that necessarily routinely every time somebody like loses a match either. So I think it's one of the more typical ways to act out because if you're at home in your office, you might want to punch something. If you're on the tennis court, you want to slap something. So
right.
So not to say that I don't get it, but it's like another one where we don't need to see that very frequently, but. As we're talking about with Wimbledon, you had Djokovic batting the pole at one point without penalty. So why would you ding a qualifier at the DC Open if you're not going to City Open if you're not going to fine him for that? So
exactly right. Exactly.
A fraction of the people watching. So maybe you do that in juniors tennis. If you want to teach them the right way to act once they're on the main draw or something, but otherwise pointless, I would think.
Exactly. Yeah, spot on, Paul. It's like, you gotta kind of, weigh things evenly as best as you can, because again, someone like Djokovic to do something like that and not get fined, and then you've got somebody else, at a much smaller event getting fined. It's like, oh, come on, folks, let's be consistent.
Right. The guy's had a bad enough day that he didn't get to a main draw of the tournament, so leave him alone, But,
exactly.
Yeah, not going to the Sportsmanship Hall of Fame anytime soon.
Exactly. So, Paul, as we wrap up, anything else that you want to kind of share with the listeners and or viewers out there, my friend?
No, I just thank you guys for having me again. I always have a good time on here. What's the next big one I should be focusing on? I guess they're in the South American and Asian swings right now. So maybe we have to see if anything goofy happens at the year-end Masters tournaments in either of them.
Absolutely.
Or the Labor Cup. The Labor Cup is such a laid-back thing where I wouldn't expect anybody to go bananas if something happens. So, I'd love to get to that one of these days. I don't know if you guys have been to the Labor Cup, but if it ever winds up near here, I'd love to check that out.
Yeah. Bryce and I as well. We would love to go to the Labor Cup. So we are looking forward to when it comes back to the States, and hopefully we can do some coverage. Oh, yes.
Excellent. I'm right there behind you, real sleek looking court and setup. I just love the presentation there. So
absolutely. All right.
Oh, wait, here's one more random thought for you, though.
Yeah.
I talked about this with my soon-to-be partner today. Would you welcome a throwback tournament every year that uses wood rackets again, just to see how current players would perhaps do with old school rackets?
I think, yeah, absolutely.
Just scratch an itch, yeah. Because the interesting thing with tennis is it's not like pound for pound in boxing where you could say, okay, this guy was the same size in 1936 that this guy is in 2023. Some people will tell you it's an entirely different game because of the rackets. So how do you compare, Rod Laver with Novak Djokovic if they're not even using the same sort of, equipment in comparison? I mean, I don't think there's tennis pound for pound debates in the same way there is boxing ones, but it's just kind of interesting. It's been such a change. Same thing with golf, as he was pointing out in this conversation today. So, but just food for thought. Some sort of retro wood racket tournament would be kind of interesting.
Definitely. We would be all in for that. That's for sure.
Yep.
All right. Well, Paul, once again, thank you as always for coming on to the show. We absolutely love having you, my man. And again, we will have you back again because there's always something going on in the world of tennis. So we always need that legal oversight and perspective. So we appreciate that from you, my friend.
Looking forward to it as long as the player in question stays out of trouble. We don't need more Haleps, but we'll take more minor violations. So.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, on behalf of the podcast, I am Isaac. That is Bryce. And we are Brothers on Tennis. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening in. And we will see you very soon.
Excellent.